What is going on, guys? And welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, where today we are on our 37th in-depth character review. And yes, we are reviewing the highly requested, the highly demanded Clone Wars Chewbacca. So many of you guys wanted to see a Chewbacca review, and we are going all out, guys. I have Zeta footage. I'm going to be as neutral as possible until I get to my subjective part of the review. And before we get started, if you guys are interested, I have a Patreon page where you can get early access to my videos, hang out with me on a monthly basis, and gain access to the materials I use for my in-depth reviews. So feel free to check that out. But we gotta get straight into Chewbacca's review. So let's take a look at the history of our good old friend Chewbacca. The version of Chewbacca that we currently have in the game to use is the Clone Wars version of him, where he was born on the planet of Kashyyyk and served as a military leader for the Wookiees. Chewbacca was known to be a fierce warrior who does whatever possible to survive, as we saw in the episode where he was captured by the Trandoshan slavers. During one of the last battles of the Clone Wars that took place on Kashyyyk, Order 66 was initiated, and Chewbacca was critical in helping Yoda escape off the planet during the fall of the Jedi Order. But as we know, Chewbacca's legacy continues on, even beyond the Clone Wars. But in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, we continue to see Chewbacca attempt to do whatever possible to survive in battle through self-cleansing and self-healing so that he may attempt to protect his allies from the harm that they may face in battle. And first off, we have to talk about how do we unlock this character in the game. There are actually many free-to-play avenues in the game, but each and every one of us should have unlocked Chewbacca as one of our first characters when we first opened up the game for the very first time, and you should have unlocked him at 3 stars. But if you want to take Chewbacca even further, you need to go through a couple of things. There are hard battles in the game you can farm him on, Dark Side 2D and Light Side 3E, both costing 12 energy each. We also have the Cantina battles, the most popular method to farm Chewbacca on, with the battles being 1C, which requires 8 energy, as well as 5G, which requires 12 energy. And if you want to get more chances of Chewbacca shards, I highly recommend you farm him on battle 1C of the Cantina. And finally, you can also find lots of Chewbacca shards in the Bronzium packs, and the estimated time to get the 7 stars is actually quite good. I will make a conservative estimate, but if you can at least get 10 shards a day of Chewbacca, that should be more than enough to get him to 7 stars in under 30 days. Now we take a look at Chewbacca's stats in the game. How does he compare to all the other characters when we just look at the numbers and we first roll up to the pros, where he actually is good in quite a couple things? Firstly, he is number 6 in armor penetration, with the average armor penetration being 52. Chewbacca is 101, meaning his attacks won't be mitigated as much, but as we will see, he is not the biggest damage dealing character in the game. However, since he is a tank, it is great to see he is number 17 in health, with the average being 19,338. Chewbacca is at 25,368. And likewise, he is also number 23 in protection, which is a good thing to see out of a tank, with the average being a flat 20,000 protection. Chewbacca, he's at 26,404. And since we're on those two topics, let's look at combined health and protection, where he is number 21, with the average combined health and protection being 39,338. Chewbacca is at 51,772. And we got 2 more things here. He is number 32 in armor, with the average being 225. Chewbacca is 244, meaning he will be able to mitigate damage a lot better than some other characters in the game. And the last pro is health steal. He has 10% health steal, and some health steal is better than no health steal in my book. Let's take a stroll over to the average stats for Chewbacca, and not much is in here, and it is slightly important, and that is potency, where he is number 68. Average potency is 31%, and Chewbacca is just a tad below that at 28%, and this is important since he does remove turn meter. It is now time for us to hold hands together, and let's help Chewie through these tough times, where we gotta talk about the stuff that Chewbacca wants to cry about. And these things are something that would make a grown Wookiee want to cry, with the first thing being speed, where our buddy Chewie is number 104 in this game, with the average speed being 127. We see Chewbacca at 106. Two more things to go, guys. With the basic damage in this game, we see Chewbacca is number 98, with the average basic damage being 5,514. Chewbacca is at 3,216, so a very low damage output. Since this is Chewbacca's only attack, this is also his maximum damage attack, where he is number 107, way down there at the bottom, with the average being 4,313. Chewbacca's maximum damage is 3,216. So alright, the numbers are all over the place, but how does this actually work in application? And to know that, we need to look at his abilities and kit, where his basic attack is known as Bowcaster. It's his basic and only attack, where it deals physical damage to a target enemy with a 55% chance to remove 50% turn meter. So a very basic attack, but it's one that does come in handy in the raid, as I will talk about later. Next up here is Wookiee Rage with a 3-turn cooldown. Chewbacca taunts and gains 30% health up for 2 turns. Very basic yet again, and I will save my thoughts later on. The next ability is Defiant Roar, has a 3-turn cooldown, and guys, Chewbacca has a Zeta ability, if you guys did not know that. Before giving him his Zeta upgrade, his ability looks like this. Chewbacca recovers 40% of his max health and gains defense up for 3 turns, with a 25% chance to also gain 25% turn meter. Now, if you give him the Zeta upgrade, it looks something like this. Additionally, on top of everything before, Chewbacca can actually dispel all debuffs from himself, and he has an additional 25% chance to gain turn meter, and he gains an additional 10% health. So he recovers 50% health in total. I'll save my thoughts on this Zeta, but please, if you don't make it all the way to the end, don't give him his Zeta upgrade, and stay tuned for more information why. Wookiee Resolve is his leader ability, and all allies have a plus 50 defense and have a 50% chance to gain defense up for 3 turns whenever they are damaged. And this is arguably one of the worst leader abilities in the game in terms of mid-game and end-game viability, and more on that later, because now we have one more objective thing to look at, and that is the gear requirements. Now in raid gear, Chewie's actually looking pretty good. Average amount of raid gear needed is 3, and Chewbacca only needs 1 piece, which is the Mark 7 Nubian security scanner, which you don't need until gear 9, which is quite nice. Good old Chewie's also looking pretty darn good for the gold gear, because normally the average character needs 200 pieces, and Chewbacca only needs 0 pieces, which is one of a very few characters in the game. When we examine purple gear, we see he's roughly in the top third in the game, with the average amount of purple gear being needed is 1,133. Chewbacca needs 1,290 pieces, which puts him at number 34 in purple gear requirements in the game, with the most popular purple piece being the Mark 3 Carbonite sensor arrays, where he will need 350 pieces. And lastly, the good old blue, green, and white gear. We see he is slightly below average for blue and average for green and white. Alright, now I've been keeping a straight face for way too long. Time to take off the gloves and let's get serious about Chewbacca. And we first roll up to my personal thoughts on this character. Now, don't get me wrong, Chewbacca is a character which is great to teach the very beginner player on the importance of taunting and healing, as well as teaching you what a leader ability is, since chances are he is the first leader you will have in the game for a little bit of time. Once you start obtaining more than 5 characters, he is usually the first one to go, and his mid-game and end-game viability is not all that great, and it's pretty minimum. Being a tank nowadays is a pretty big role and a very complicated role on top of that. It requires you to taunt early and to taunt a lot, and preferably without having to use an ability to call the taunt, which Chewbacca cannot do so he kind of fails his role as a useful modern day tank. Now normally I give some leeway if you can't just taunt randomly like General Kenobi or Baze and you need to wait to call a taunt. You need to be good at something. Like Stormtrooper Han, if you cannot just automatically taunt and you need to wait to use an ability to taunt, you better be giving bonus turn meter left and right. You better be removing turn turn meter, stuff like that, which Stormtrooper Han is great for. But when we look at Chewbacca, he really does not offer all that much. He does not apply big damage, he does not provide any useful buffs or bonus turn meter for your team, kind of like Stormtrooper Han. Although he might have a chance to grant defense up when he is leading, defense up is one of the least useful buffs in the game as of now. To keep the list going, he does not apply any sort of deadly debuffs, his heal is very selfish, and his cleanse from his Zeta ability is also very selfish because it's just focusing on him. The fact that his taunt and heal and cleanse are in two separate abilities is horrible, considering that it is something that is usually combined into one ability or maybe in one unique for most current characters. He also has next to zero synergy with any other character in the game, with his only main tag being Scoundrel. As we know, Scoundrels are not the best faction in the game, and if you are going to use Scoundrels, chances are you won't use Chewbacca because he does not have much stuff going on. Keep in mind, his kit has changed very little since his release in the game, which he is one of the first characters to be released in the game, and the Zeta upgrade to Defiant Roar is the only update he has gotten, which is probably the worst Zeta ability as of now. It is not game-changing, does not radically change himself as a character, and does not offer anything additional to his team or against his enemies. So long story short, if you made it this far and you want to stop right now, just please do not invest in Chewbacca's Zeta ability. Now, I will grant this for Chewbacca, it is really great, especially for a beginner player in this game who does not have many turn meter removal characters. The fact that he can remove 50% turn meter is really great because this means he's a very accessible beginner character for the Rancor raid. And as you know, turn meter removal is king to dominating the Rancor raid. But in case you want to run Chewbacca because you're a beginner player, you don't have that many characters, or you just completely disagree with me and you're going to use Chewbacca no matter what, well, hear me out and let's take a look at the mortal enemies you should be aware of. And let me tell you, Chewbacca has a lot of enemies out there that you should be aware of. Not too many people like him. First of all, shock, buff immunity, and buff dispellers prevent him from gaining buffs, and the shock goes even further to prevent him from healing and gaining any sort of turn meter from anyone, ability block, stun, people who can increase cooldowns like Darth Nihilus, prevent him from ever touching his abilities, which allow him to taunt, heal, or cleanse, so he just kind of stands around like a big hairy lump doing nothing. Speed down is a huge thing to make him even slower, and he never gets the opportunity to take a turn. Healing immunity is also pretty big. Tenacity up is a pretty big thing because you won't be able to remove turn meter from someone, and there are just so many others to prevent him from ever trying to be useful. Now, even though it is a cruel world out there for poor old Chewie, there is a glimmering light where he does have some best friends. And sadly, in terms of faction synergy, it's only really with the Scoundrels. He doesn't have a Republic tag, even though he's a Clone Wars version of Chewbacca. He's not a Rebel, so he doesn't gain all the lovely Rebel synergies. So Scoundrels are his best friends, I suppose, although he is not gaining much from them or giving much to them because of his poor abilities. Healers are also great for Chewbacca to make sure you top off his high health pool. Barriss Zeta is probably Chewbacca's closest friend because Chewbacca has the opportunity to gain a lot of health when critically hit, and when he's taunting, he's likely to take on some critical hits. So Barriss, thank you so much for giving poor old Chewie a hug. Although kind of sad, in my opinion, Chewbacca would really benefit having another taunter on the field because it takes him a while to finally taunt, so you might want someone else to taunt for him so he's not getting ability block or getting buff immunity, all that fun jazz. Characters that can keep him cleansed are also great. Turn meter removal characters is probably one of his favorite things to be in, especially for a beginner player's Rancor team. Any character that can grant turn meter or speed him up through the speed up buff is great, but overall there aren't too many great friends unlike other characters like Chirrut, Baze, Kenobi, and so forth. But now let's take a look at the mods you should be using on Chewbacca, and pretty much if you're using him for arena or anything else outside of the raid, I highly recommend using the health, defense, or tenacity mod sets. But if you are going into the Rancor raid, definitely use the potency mod sets to make sure his turn meter removal is not being resisted. He is one of those characters that will not benefit from offense or critical chance and critical damage mods since he has only one attack, and that one attack hits very little damage in the game. Primary and secondary mods is really what you should be focusing on, and I highly recommend giving him lots of protection mods to at least make him take a lot of punches. Health is also good. Potency is 100% must if you want to remove turn meter for the Rancor raid. Speed is definitely necessary if you ever want him to take a turn more often than usual in any mods involving damage like before, because he has one attack and it has a very low damage output. Now, the last thing we're going to take a look at is Yoda's do or do not checklist. And the very first thing that we must look at is Arena. And unless you're a very beginner player, I highly recommend to not use him. So big fat do not. For Galactic War, unless you're a beginner player with a very small inventory, I am going to say do not, especially for the mid-game and end-game player. Chewbacca is only going to be one of your dead last characters to use because you are starting to run out of characters, but overall, he is not going to make or break Galactic War for you. Light side battles and Cantina battles, I will be lenient and say do, because you can use his leader ability and pair him up with an ally's leader ability, which might grant a lot of defense, and it does become helpful at some point. But again, if you're an end game or mid game player, you're probably going to use something else. Mod challenges is a do, mainly because he is a scoundrel, but you probably have a lot of other scoundrels you can use. Ships is going to be a do not. Since this is the Clone Wars specific Chewbacca, he probably will not be getting the Millennium Falcon. They might release some sort of normal Chewbacca that is not Clone Wars era specific. So as of now, I do not foresee Clone Wars Chewbacca getting a ship anytime soon. The Rancor raid is a definite do. I mentioned this earlier, but Chewbacca is a great beginner raid character, and turn meter removal is something even an advanced player can use. So let's say do. That is one thing he is actually useful for. And the AAT raid, it's going to be a do not. Not a top tier character, more like a 5th string character, so don't expect him to be breaking the AAT raid anytime soon. And now it is time to pull up the Hall of Fame and see where the Clone Wars Chewbacca lands in the big picture of things. Now, if you saw my video where I ranked all the characters in the game, you would have seen that we ranked Chewbacca as a youngling. Now, Chewbacca, in my opinion, is more on the upper tail of youngling, I suppose. However, his numbers are all right, but he needs a complete overhaul of his kit with more synergy to work in many lineups. But there you have it, guys. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this video. We had a lot of fun. We looked at the Zeta version of the Clone Wars Chewbacca. And as always, let me know down below what you would like to see next. A lot of people want to see Krennic and Death Trooper, so if you want, I will make a combined video with those two. So let me know down below. And as always, leave me a like if you did enjoy this video. Comment down below. Check out my Patreon page. And make sure you're subscribed so you're not missing a thing. And we will talk again soon. Peace out.